Hi friends! Welcome to the Overcomers, a movement and a group of people who have overcome and they've got a story. That's what the Overcomers is all about. You sharing your story. Why? Because there is power in your story and people need you. They need your voice. They need your story of hope, faith, and inspiration that where they're at right now is not the end. They need to know if you can overcome, so can they. Today, I'm excited to share with you another story of one such overcomer. So let's go check out who it is. I'm honored to be here today with my friend Amanda Ignot. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So for those tuning in that don't know my friend Amanda, like I have had the pleasure of getting to know her, I just want to share a few things about her before we get started. Amanda is an amazing mom joining us from Missouri. She's overcome a lot in life, from divorce and relationships going nowhere to having a miscarriage at just 20 years old. She went 15 years without conceiving, even once. Now she's the mother of 4, and her marriage is stronger, closer, and more supportive, and they make decisions together. She's also now helping women own their power and birth on their terms. But what I'm blown away most by you, Amanda, is how you've taken what you've learned on your journey to healing and are now using that to support other women in their childbearing years. And you give them confidence. You're an incredible woman of faith. And that's quite a statement to say with how difficult the road you've had to walk. You didn't give up. And now you're inspiring so many other women that there's hope for them too. So that's why I'm so excited to have you with us today to share your story, because so many people need to hear stories like this. So tell us, take us on that journey. How did you go from where you once were to where you are now?
So I would say my journey started, I got married to the wrong guy at the wrong time, right? We all jump when we're young and think we know things that maybe we don't know. And what I did, I jumped into a marriage. We ended up getting pregnant right away, which we were not trying, but we obviously weren't doing anything to prevent. And when I found out I was pregnant, like I bawled my eyes out. Like I was like, I'm not ready for this. I don't know what to do. And my husband was like, you're not pregnant. I was like, yeah, I am. And then a few months later, I had a miscarriage that nearly broke me. I cried for months every night going to bed, like, where's my baby? I just want my baby. And unfortunately, during my actual miscarriage, my young husband, I was only 19 when I got married, and he was about the same age. And he didn't know how to help me, he didn't know how to support me. And he definitely didn't know how to be present for me in those moments. And he didn't understand my brokenness. And this is something that women generally don't understand about men, but a baby is really not a baby until like they can feel it move in your belly. Like until those moments, they're kind of not a real thing to a man. So I had an early miscarriage and he just didn't like, to him it was like a just a part of life, right? Like he didn't connect emotionally to that pregnancy. But I, because I was carrying that baby, did. And therefore it almost broke me. And I remember just not even like every time I went out, I would run into somebody who knew that I had been pregnant, right? They didn't know that I had had a miscarriage. So it was having to answer that question over and over again. Oh, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Oh, I had a miscarriage. Seeing your friends who were pregnant previous to you getting pregnant, seeing them pushing strollers, seeing their belly growing, like that was like emotional trauma over and over and over again. And a few years later, I found myself divorced, moved on to, like, in a year, I was dating somebody and I was with that person for 6 years and we never conceived. And I, for most of that 6 years, didn't try to prevent. And then I was almost 30. And at that point, I didn't care what happened in my life. I wanted to be a mom. Um, I remember telling my mom I was almost 30. And when I was like 14, before I even was thinking about having sex, which was like a weird, I don't understand why I had these conversations or when I was that young and not even in that place. I said, I don't want to have kids after I'm 30. I don't want to be an old mom. So I was turning 30 and I said to my mom, I said, you know what? I don't even care if this is a one night stand. I want to be a mom. Like, I was in a place where obviously, what does that statement say? Did I value myself?
Mm.
No, I didn't. Because if I was willing to become a mom through a one night stand, well, I was just giving myself away to anybody who would pay that attention. So there was a lot of disconnect in there where I wasn't loving myself. And therefore, like, when I say I was in three different relationships. One was 6 years, one was a year, and one was about a year and a half in that 15-year or 13-year span. And then I was with my husband and I met my husband. Well, one thing that shifted in me when I met my husband, so my ex-husband was Mexican. My now husband is Mexican. But when I married my ex-husband, I literally told him, I'm like, look, I'm not a Mexican wife and I will not cook and clean and do all the things that, you know, the Mexican wives do. I'm not that girl. So you will help me around the house. You'll, if you want to eat, you'll cook for yourself. And so that's who I was before. Then I meet my husband and I literally stepped into the wife position that I had like refused to step into before. I wanted to cook. I kept a house. I made the bed every day. Like, I treated it so much differently. Our relationship was so much different. And we, again, right from the start of starting to date, um, we were trying to conceive. And um, I didn't conceive. And it started feeling like there's something wrong with me. I'm never going to be a mom. I was 33 when I met him, and we started dating. And so by 35, I still had not conceived. And we started seeing fertility specialists. And so I went through the process and we finally conceived on our fourth and last IUI. It was our last chance. And I have to rewind a little bit because at one point we actually split up. And I had already kind of started tracking my cycles at this point. And I asked my husband then when we split up, I'm like, will you continue on this journey with me? I was like, look, I'm not getting any younger. I'm not going to jump into another relationship. Like, I can't even imagine myself because, first of all, I couldn't breathe without my husband. Like, that hurt me in such a bad way. And I see now where God separated me from him for a reason. Um, God needed to put me in a place where I cried out to him, like where he called me home in that. And so there's a lot of shifts at that point in my life where from my teenage years, my young teenage years, I had really denied God and denied a relationship with him due to things that happened in our family life back then. Um, and I just didn't want any part of what I thought he was from my 14-year-old mindset. um, And I carried that with me for a lot of years, but I realized, like, looking back, like, when I was in those relationships, I was searching for something that no man on earth can fill, if that makes sense. But I didn't value myself in those relationships either. Like, I needed their approval to feel worthy.
Mm.
Like, if I didn't have that partner in my life, I was less than. I was not, um a valued person, so to say. So I did a lot of things that could have gotten me in a lot of trouble. But I realize now, like, it was a journey where first, like, I never viewed a relationship the way I viewed my relationship with my husband. And that shift in me was really a drastic one to me. Like, I was like, that's just different. Like, I'm not this person, but all of a sudden I am this person and happy to be this person, right? Like, it shifted in a way that it was like an embrace, like, oh, this is home.
Mm.
And it was different. And then when we split up, like I said, I couldn't breathe without him. The only way I could make it through a day is I woke up, I got dressed, and I went outside into the cool, fresh morning air, and I walked with gusto, and I cried out all of the pain and suffering that I was going through, not having that love of my life with me. And I didn't second guess when I got a text. And yes, he asked through text. He said, "Will you marry me?" And I was like, "Yes, when?" Like, let's do this tomorrow because you're not walking away again, right? And so I said yes, and we actually waited. This was before Thanksgiving, but we waited until January 1st, and we got married on January 1st of 2012. And so the split up was really just about 6 to 8 weeks. It wasn't a very long split. Um, I think we both learned a lot about ourselves
Mm.
in that. And he will tell you he only came back because he was scared I was going to hurt myself. Not that I was in a place where I was acting like I was going to hurt myself, but he also saw, because he would come and visit me, and I had doctor's appointments where he lived, and I had to see him for those doctor's appointments. And so he could see, like, I was losing weight like there was no tomorrow. Like, he could see physical changes in me that he was like, I don't know if I like where this is going. And it wasn't that I was using that. It was like I physically couldn't, like, I couldn't even have, I love coffee. I couldn't even drink my coffee because I like my sugar and cream. And those things would upset my stomach because I was in such a state of emotional depression. It wasn't even I don't even know how to explain it. It was like, just like, it affected how I could eat. It affected how I could move, how I could breathe. It affected everything about me. And then when we got back together, we got married, and I still wasn't conceiving. It was like, why? Like, what is the holdup here? What's the gap? And then I conceived on our fourth and last IUI. And our relationship was really rough. Like, we were not at all. Like I said, we got married on a precipitous, for a reason that wasn't exactly love, right? It was a feeling of obligation on his part, or like, he didn't want to be responsible for anything that happened to me, and he saw it going not his way. But he also saw that he could live the single man life, but what was he going to gain from it? So he saw an opportunity for growth in a different way, I guess. And anyways, we went on to conceive, and it was kind of one of those surreal moments in your life where I had had 3 IUIs before, and the 2 week wait, any woman who's ever been trying to conceive, the 2 week wait is like the worst part of everything.
Mm.
because you're waiting that 2 weeks, and it's either your period's going to show up or not, and you're going to have a positive test. But if you're trying to conceive, that like that 2 weeks seems like a year long. It's full of anxiety and emotion and the what ifs and all of that. And you can't, it's really hard to distract yourself from this. It's really hard to like not hyper focus on whether your period's going to come or whether something's going on inside your womb that you cannot feel, right? Like it's so hard not to focus on that. So when my fourth IUI came and went, like I had already had 3 failed previously. I had already been on Clomid and progesterone and estrogen for 8 months. Like I was tired. And I also knew that if I didn't conceive, my marriage was not likely to last any duration of time after that. And so I had the fourth IUI. I continued on with my life, like trying to just not even think about it. I had been exercising and just doing things to take care of me leading up to that point. And I just kept going through the motions of doing those things on a daily. And it's funny because I remember like exact days of the week. So like my period should have started on Tuesday and it didn't come. Wednesday came and went. Thursday came and went. But I was so terrified of having another negative test, like a negative pregnancy test, that I couldn't even make myself take the test. Like my mind was stuck in that space, was as soon as I take the test, my period will start, right? Like it was like that thing. I've been here before. In all actuality, I had not been there before because I had never been late. But I still couldn't make myself take the test. And my doctor was like, just take the test. I don't understand your hang up. I'm like, well, I'm a woman who hasn't conceived in 15 years. That is my hang up, right? Like you have to understand emotionally and physically where somebody is coming from. And obviously my doctor was totally ignorant of that. Um, so finally, like I'm on the treadmill and I've had to stop the treadmill twice already to go to the bathroom. So I was like, okay, I'll take that as a sign to test. And I tested and like, I don't know if you've ever found yourself in a situation where you're trying to look at something and you're trying to not look at something. That's what doing a pregnancy test is like, because you have to leave it sit for a couple minutes. And so you're like, I'm like pacing around my tiny little apartment and I'm trying not to look in the bathroom and trying to look at the bathroom at the same time. You know, like I'm like this inner battle of not wanting to see it, but wanting to see it. And when I saw the positive test, I literally fell to the floor and praised God in Spanish, which is not my first language. So it was kind of, I'm like, that is a detail that sticks out to me, like hilariously. Like, I'm like, Spanish is my second language. That was interesting. But I fell to the floor and I bawled my eyes out, praising God that I was finally pregnant. And then I text my husband and I'm like, come inside. You've got to come inside. And he comes in and I'm like, go to the bathroom. Like, I can't even speak at this point. I'm like, just go to the bathroom. So he goes, he looks at it and he's like, is it positive? And I was like, he's like, really? And so we kind of had this moment. And then the next thing out of my mouth was, but that doesn't mean it'll stick. And if you think about it, that I nearly cursed it right there in those words. I nearly cursed it because I had had a loss. And that loss was 15 years earlier. But it didn't stop me from saying, well, I got pregnant. Doesn't mean it'll stick, because I had already experienced a pregnancy not sticking. And I look back now and I'm like, gosh, why did I have to steal his joy? Like, I understand the need to protect myself. I understand, like, in that moment, how I needed to, like, mentally prepare my heart, my body for if it didn't stick. But I feel like I stole something from him in those words because he hadn't experienced that. It stuck. My words did not have anything on it. And I'm grateful for that. Like, praise God that he heard my first cries and realized that those words were not meant for this time in my life. So we went through this pregnancy and I followed all the rules. I did all the things, and it was really unnerving and really an emotional uphill battle through the whole thing. I was older. I was 37. I actually had just turned 37 when I had my fourth IUI 2 weeks or 2 days before my 37th birthday. And so my daughter was born before I turned 38. And through that whole experience, it was like, I don't know, my doctor felt like there was no care for me. It was just coming in and doing the measurements. And then about 4.5 months in, I had gained quite a bit of weight at this point. Partially because I stopped doing the things I had been doing, because again, I had that fear of causing a miscarriage.
Yeah.
So I stopped all the exercises, even the walking on a treadmill. I stopped because I was terrified of causing this miscarriage. And it shows you that I had very little faith in my body, myself, and like the whole process of it. And so when, like, I followed all the rules, I didn't do any research, I just followed the check boxes of my doctor. And so by 4.5 months, she was talking about I was probably going to need a C-section. And now I know that this is something that's very common in the medical industry, but I didn't know it back then because I wasn't doing my own research. And so from that point on, I literally felt bullied at every appointment.
Mm.
It was like, what are you eating? What are you doing? Why are you doing that? Why do you keep gaining weight? And all these questions. And by the end of it, she was actually telling me I needed to lose weight. And I was like, I don't think that that's possible at the end of a pregnancy. Like, there's a baby getting bigger and bigger in there. Tell me if I'm wrong, but don't think that's like even physically possible. So in the end, it came down to my baby was breech. She was not head down. And again, another form of normal that I now am aware of, but most doctors will not attend a vaginal birth if you have a breech baby. And so they're an automatic C-section.
Wow.
But no, you have options. Look into them because I did not. I just, at that point, I hated my doctor so much that I wanted her out of my life. So I was like, what's the fastest way to get her out of my life? Have the C-section and be done with it. And so I scheduled the C-section against my gut instinct. Mom, all you moms out there, trust your gut instinct, because your gut is your central focus. It's your compass. If your gut is telling you that something's off, you need to talk to somebody else, get a second opinion, or like come on to the socials and ask questions, because you will find there have been several women in your place. So anyways, I did that. I had the C-section, but then I found myself in a weird position because I had failed to conceive on my own. And then I had failed to have my baby the way that I believe babies are meant to be born. So I felt broken on two different levels, right? Like I felt like there's something physically wrong with my body that wouldn't allow me to conceive, wouldn't allow me to have a baby. And I was just a couple weeks postpartum, and I remember very vividly standing in my living room holding my tiny little baby, and my eyes probably got this big, and I was like, what? I have to make all decisions for this life? I'm not qualified for this. Like, I was like, there is so much I don't know. And then it was like in that very moment when I'm looking at her and having that realization that I had so many decisions to make about her physical, emotional life, and like even medical decisions, right? Because we have to decide, are we taking them to the wellness checks? Are we doing this? Are we doing that? Right? And most of us just go because that's what we're told to do, right? And
Yeah.
I realized, like, it was like God used that moment to say, you're not broken. That system that served you is broken.
Mm.
Has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. Question everything. It was like he showed me what was wrong with the world on every level. Like, I had never thought about being a stay-at-home mom. I mean, obviously you have a baby and you're like, I never want to leave. Right? You're like, I'm staying here. But I had never really thought that far ahead, right? Like, we tend not to think about what happens after you have the baby until the
Yeah.
baby's here. And then you're like, oh yeah, this changes everything. But we've because women have been working outside of the home for so long, it's not even a thought process for us to think like, well, do I want to stay home? Do I not want to stay home? But in that moment, I was like, it was like, okay, we're homeschooling, we're doing, like, we're eating cleaner, we're doing this, we're doing that. Like, it was like things just became like a veil was lifted from my eyes in that moment. And I also, like, after having my daughter, it was like the weirdest thing, but for the first 6 months of her life, like, I was desperately, like, after I returned to work, so she was probably like 3.5, 4 months old. But after I returned to work, I was like desperately looking for a church for us to attend. Our God, my God, used my daughter to pull me back into the fold. Like, I had broken down and cried out when I lost like when my husband and I split up. But then when we got back together, I kind of, you know, wandered again, like we humans do. We're like, we are of the flesh and the flesh is weak. And I kind of just, yeah, I kind of felt like still that pull, but I wasn't seeking it.
Mm.
And even through the fertility part of it, it wasn't like I was praying and asking for what I wanted in that. And that was something that now I'm like, pray. It's on your heart, pray about it, because he puts those desires on your heart. And sometimes we have to walk through a hard journey to get to where he needs us to be, for us
Mm.
uh, to be led to the people he's created us to be, right? And we may not understand it, and that's completely normal because we can't understand what the process is to get to a something. But now I look back and I'm like, everything I walked through, every experience I had literally led me to a place where I can be a voice for God and his glory. He opened a dry womb.
Mm.
I had a dry womb, and he opened it up and he let life come out of there. And that was one transformation I needed to have. And it needed to happen the way it happened, because when he lifted the veil and he said,
Mm.
you're not broken, that system is broken, I was determined that my child would not grow up in that system. And I was determined that if we were to have more children, I would not be going through that system. And I had utter and complete, like, after that moment and to this day, the confidence I have in a woman's body can't be touched,
Mm.
because God poured all of his confidence in what he created into me in that moment. When he said, you're not broken, I was instantly healed of that thought.
Wow.
Instantly. I never doubted my body. When my husband came to me, or when we had a conversation and he was like, I didn't, he was a one and done. And then somebody mentioned that his name wouldn't carry on unless he had a son.
Mm.
And so he was like, I want to try again. I want to try to have a boy. Okay. We never even thought about calling a doctor to help with conception. Like that thought had gone out of our heads. We
Wow.
never questioned it again. And we conceived within 2 cycles of him saying that and me saying, well, yes, let's do this. Like,
Wow.
we conceived immediately. And again, I found myself in a bad, not in a bad place, but I miscarried again. And I was like, and this time I kind of walked through it differently, partially because I'd already been through it. So I kind of like had like the physical preparedness of like knowing what was coming, knowing that I could do it at home. And it's like, I didn't need, like, I never even thought of going in for a D&C. So many women are told that D&C is the only way to go. And like, as soon as you know you're miscarrying, you go in and you have it dealt with. But I've never wanted that. I had my first miscarriage at home. I wanted my second miscarriage at home. The thing that was different this time though was that I had a toddler. It was different, right? Like I had this life that I couldn't just hide under the blankets. I couldn't just bury myself.
Mm.
And I kind of walked through the same thing of when I was actually experiencing the miscarriage, my husband couldn't support me. Not because he didn't know how, but because he was busy taking care of a toddler.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so it was like I'm in the bathroom and I'm crying for him. And he's like, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I have a vivid memory of him, like he's sitting right outside the bathroom door. And he's like, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, I don't even know. I just need to know you're here because this is painful and it's not what I want it to be. And but again, there was a lesson in that miscarriage. And that was that, like, that took a giant leap in me learning and like saying, no, you need to learn more about your body and what it needs and how it functions. You need to do this. And something like in my first pregnancy, when I had that moment of clarity that I wasn't broken, but the system was broken, I vowed then and there, like, even if I'm not going to have any more kids, I'm going to be very vocal about this. I'm going to share that this is not how your pregnancy should go. This is not how you should feel in the end. Like I've said it before, no woman should ever have to come to make a decision to have a scheduled C-section or wait until her body's ready and see what happens based on how they feel about their doctor. I made that decision on how can I get this woman out of my life?
Mm.
Because I felt belittled, I felt bullied, I felt uncared for. Like I didn't feel like
Wow.
I was in a relationship where I was seen as an individual who has emotions and feelings and needs within that space. And like there was no education along the way either. There wasn't any like explanation of like, well, this is what labor could be like, or you know what I mean? Like, where it's like none of this support that you should have
Mm.
from your care provider. Your care provider should be answering your questions, not telling you how things are going to go. And so from that moment, I was like, I'm going to be vocal. But then I learned, like, through that miscarriage, I had that miscarriage because of low progesterone, but I had to fight with my doctor to even run my progesterone. And one thing I found kind of interesting in that is that I had to fight for that.
Mm.
Why? They work for you. Why do I have to even, like, if I'm requesting it, you do it because you work for me and I pay the bill.
Mm-hmm.
So it works. And in that, I was like, wait a second. So I had a miscarriage. but I'd have to do this 2 or 3 times before you would test for these things. No, a woman should not have to suffer through multiple losses before she receives help
Mm.
or the testing that could rule some things out, because why should anybody have to suffer through a loss? I think that if a woman goes to the doctor and says, "Hey, I'm ready to start a family," the first thing the doctor should do is run a panel on her hormones and make sure at specific times through her cycle to see how her hormones are moving and flowing through her cycle to know, right? Because you can find answers in that and you can support yourself through that. And so I learned I had low progesterone, which a friend of mine told me as soon as I thought I might be miscarrying. She was like, go get some progesterone cream and start applying it. And so I was like, okay. And I did, but I had waited too long because I was in the middle of going on a vacation and it was like all up in the air. But I had my miscarriage and life kind of just went on. I didn't process it the way I did, but I also didn't like live in that space of hurt this time. Like I was able to be like, okay, well, I had a lesson. I learned a lesson. I learned something from this. Um I started using something to support my progesterone levels on a regular basis. And I was pregnant again within 5 months of my miscarriage. Not another 15 years, because then I would have been in my 50s and it wouldn't have worked. but, but I was pregnant again within 5 months. And I've had 3 full-term pregnancies since then. And I still use this progesterone supplement daily
Wow.
to regulate my hormones. And I had my other babies at home at 40, 41, and 43. That's another talk for another time, but
Yeah.
don't let your age stop you from going after your dreams of motherhood.
So good. So good. Brand, I have to say, like hearing, I know I had gotten a tease of some of the journey and the painful journey that you have been through a few weeks ago, but just hearing more in depth the walk that you have had. Wow. 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 I'm so excited for people who are going to be listening to this because you have been through the ringer, but the lessons that you have pulled out in going through all of that for you to be able to say, this is why, and you were equipping me to become the mom that I needed to be, to fight for my kids, to have a voice.
Yeah.
Wow, you wouldn't be the mom that you are today had you not been through that. So
Right.
I think that that is so, so powerful for people to hear that, you
Yeah.
know, there's a reason why you're going through what you're going through and to be vulnerable enough today to share that journey with
Yeah.
those who are maybe going through it right now.
Yeah.
You're doing exactly what you're hoping to do and you're helping
Right.
people. So I have a
Right.
specific question for you, knowing that there's probably people listening right now that have been there or they're going through that right now. Maybe they
Mhm.
just lost a child. What one piece of advice would you tell that mom today?
Well, I'd say, first of all, look for the lesson in the loss, push back, ask for more. Your doctor works for you, and you don't owe them any explanation as to why you're asking for it. But if you even bring up the 3 things I mentioned, I was on 3 different medications. Clomid is to enhance your FHC, your folic, so creating eggs, like having your body produce more eggs. The progesterone and the estrogen were taken at specific times because your body is supposed to naturally do this, have higher estrogen for the first half of your cycle, and then after you ovulate, your progesterone goes up. If you're hormones aren't doing this, then you need to figure out why. And there's plenty of natural things you can do that I've learned over the years, but don't give up on your dream to be a mom, even if you're somebody who's had several, because I know many women who have had several miscarriages and they're looking at it and they're like, why? So don't give up. The desire on your heart comes from him.
Mm.
And that was one thing I truly learned from my lessons, is that the desire on my heart to have a marriage that was a specific way and to have children, it couldn't come together the way I was. It needed to be from a different place. I needed to be moved. And had I have given up because I turned 30, I wouldn't be a mother of four today.
Aw.
And had I just kept going through the process and not questioning and not trying to figure out what was going on, like, it can be hard to ask for help, but sometimes, and the way we eat and the way our world is today, it has a huge effect on your fertility. And so there are really some simple things that you can do without even seeing a doctor that can really help you in this journey. And I just think, for the life of me, the only thing that comes to mind is don't give up. He walks you through specific journeys throughout your life to walk you into the person he created you to be.
Yes.
And when you walk through those journeys, those experiences you have can be used to serve others who are now walking through that journey years after you walk through yours.
Mm.
And that, my friend, is his purpose or his glory, that then serves his purpose here on earth. And you can lead people to believe through your journey when you look back and look at it with a set of eyes of, where can I see God?
Mm.
In my first miscarriage, I told Jen this a couple weeks ago. I look back now and I'm like, and I've said this for many years, like after we divorced, I was like, thank goodness. Not that I want to wish away a child, because I wanted more than anything to be a mother. But had I have had a child in that time in my life when I was completely unprepared, I my entire life would be different, and I wouldn't be who I am today in my strength, in my belief, in my confidence, and in my motherhood, because I needed to stop being that broken person. I couldn't teach my children from a broken place.
Mm.
And back then I was broken because I had severed ties with God. I refused to acknowledge that there is a higher being that loves us so much that he would give anything for us. And he wants us to have a life of abundance. I didn't see that. I didn't see the worth that he has in me. And therefore, I walked through life kind of throwing that worth out the window
Mm.
at every opportunity. Had I have had that pregnancy have lasted and I would have had a child with that man, with my ex-husband, I'm not saying he's a bad person, but we were not meant to be together. He was not the one created for me. But I would have been stuck there. I would have been in a place where I would have felt stuck, but I would have been tied to him forever.
Mhm.
And it would have limited me in my movements, in where I could live, what jobs I could have, right? It would have limited me because probably I would have been a single mother, but I would have also had to cater to somebody else.
Yeah.
Now I'm in a marriage that is strong. We both have our own businesses that we support each other in each and every day. We communicate in ways that we never thought possible. And our children are close, loving. We homeschool, but there's so much freedom in what I have now that I couldn't even have imagined 20 5 years ago. I
Wow.
couldn't even
Praise
have
God.
imagined it.
Praise God.
So,
Friend, oh, go
yeah,
ahead. Did you want to say
you
something?
cannot give
Mhm.
up on your dreams because it may not look the way you think it should look. It may not happen the way you think it's going to happen. But if you give up, like trying to control the aspects around it, I can tell you this, my last two were not planned. They kind of came and God, and it's funny because with my fourth, God answered a prayer that I had been like not a praying, but I had stated many times throughout my life from the age of 14 on, is that I wanted a kid with dark hair, darker skin, but I wanted them to have my eyes. My youngest is the only one who has colored eyes. And I was like, this is why we had an unplanned pregnancy, because he had to answer a prayer. He had to answer a request. He had looked at me and said, now I'm going to bless you with what you've been asking for. And now I can look back and say, gosh, he was listening even when I was denying him.
So good. So good. We know what's so amazing about what you just shared and the fact that you were on today, friend, is that you did exactly that. You have just given help to whoever is listening today, whoever will be listening to this interview in the future. You just gave help to that person because of that journey that you have been through. And now being in that place where you're on the other side and you found healing, you found hope, and you found a family. So I just want to say thank you so much for your courage today to be with us, to take us on that journey and really share the painful parts of that walk with us. It takes a lot of courage for someone to be on an interview with us at the Overcomers. And it says everything about all that you have overcome and who you are and where your faith is. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of the Overcomers and for those who are listening and really needed your words, his words today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor and a blessing to be able to speak into others from this place.
Wow, wasn't that powerful? Do you have an overcomer story? Do you know someone who needs to hear this message? Please share this video on your social platforms and tag us so we know who you are. Stay tuned as we share more overcomer stories in the weeks ahead. We're looking for you. We're looking for the overcomers. Join us. Let's come together as the overcomers. Start sharing your story. We have multiple ways you can start getting involved and repping the movement, repping your story of what he has done in your life. And last but not least, if you want to learn how to overcome, visit www.dannyjohnson.com. That's my coach, and that's where I learned how to overcome. Thank you so much for joining with us today. We believe in you, and we believe in the power of story. We believe in your story.